Are you looking for the best low-light mirrorless camera? In this video we will look at some of the 7 best camera on the market. Before we get started with our video, we have included links in the description, so make sure you check those out to see which one is in your budget range. Starting at number 1. Nikon Z6 II. The Nikon Z6 II is, hands down, the best low-light mirrorless camera on the market in 2022, combining class-leading high ISO performance, in-body image stabilization, an exceptional shooting experience, and powerful autofocus capabilities all in one model. The price isn't unreasonable either, which makes the Nikon Z6 II a potent option for both hobbyists and professionals. More specifically, the Nikon Z6 II offers quite possibly the best high ISO performance I've ever seen in a camera, beating out, to my eye, Sony's low-light monster, the A7S III, as well as the new Canon EOS R6. The Z6 II's ISO range goes from ISO 100 to ISO 51200, and you get clean images almost every step of the way. Noise is hardly present at ISO 6400, somewhat noticeable at ISO 12800 to ISO 25600, and images at ISO 51200 are still borderline usable, truly the mark of a top-of-the-line low-light performer. The Nikon Z6 II also packs one of the highest resolution sensors on this list, offering 24 megapixels of beautiful image quality. The Z6 II hits that resolution sweet spot, offering reasonable file sizes with genuine cropping and printing capabilities, certainly enough to satisfy even more serious photographers. As for autofocusing in low light, the Nikon Z6 II goes all the way down to -4.5 EV, so you can shoot in near blackness. If you're looking to do night street photography, event photography, or low-light wildlife photography, this is essential, and will often be the difference between a successful and a failed photoshoot, and the Z6 II's autofocus system is also pretty darn impressive overall, even if it can't beat out its Canon or Sony rivals. Finally, the camera is a dream to use, thanks to Nikon's stellar design, plus a beautiful 3.69mm electronic viewfinder that former DSLR shooters will love. If you're a serious hobbyist or professional photographer and your goal is to grab the best low-light mirrorless body available, then the Nikon Z6 II is the way to go. At number 2. Sony A7S III. For hybrid stills and video shooters, as well as customers primarily interested in low-light video, the Sony A7S III is truly your best option, thanks to its superb image quality, standout video features, capable low-light autofocus performance, and mind-blowing electronic viewfinder. Yes, it's expensive, and it's certainly not the optimal choice for stills photographers, but for those who need a low-light video camera, it's the camera to beat. First, the video features. The Sony A7S III can record beautiful 4K/120p footage, plus you get a fully articulating screen for shooting from odd angles, in-body image stabilization for smooth footage at all times, and a host of video special features, including S-Log, 240 frames per second when shooting in HD, and more. The A7S III is a video camera that can occasionally work for stills, which is why its major stills weakness is its greatest low-light strength. With a full-frame sensor packing just 12 megapixels of resolution, you can't crop and you can't print large, but you can capture photos or videos that look great up to ISO 12800, and even into the ISO 51200 range. If you're frequently shooting footage indoors or at night, the A7S III opens up a lot of opportunities, especially when combined with a wide aperture lens. Then there's the low-light autofocus, which lets you shoot at a whopping -6 EV. And while you should expect the autofocus to struggle somewhat as you descend into near darkness, Sony's cameras are equipped with the best autofocus available, and will keep you hitting that record button long after other shooters have headed home. At number 3. Canon EOS R6. For low-light action photographers who don't want to break the bank, there's a new king in town. The Canon EOS R6, which offers many standard tools, plus a few standout features where it counts. As you might expect from a 20MP, cutting-edge mirrorless camera, ISO performance is superb. You can nail noiseless shots at ISO 3200, still beautiful shots at ISO 6400, and even usable images at ISO 25600. While this isn't quite as good as the Nikon Z6 II or the Sony A7S III, the EOS R6 manages to push past the high ISO capabilities of former low-light aficionados such as the Sony A7 III, below, and will certainly dazzle all but the most demanding low-light photographers. And while 20MP may seem small compared to the EOS R6's 45MP sibling, Bear in mind that it packs the same number of megapixels as Canon's flagship 1DX Mark III DSLR, a camera used by many of the best action photographers in the world. Megapixel count aside, the Canon EOS R6 is quite possibly the most well-rounded low-light mirrorless camera on this list. It packs all the features you'd want in a low-light body, including the aforementioned high ISO performance, excellent in-body image stabilization, for handholding indoors and after sundown, and a nice 3.69mm electronic viewfinder. Plus there's the 4K/60p recording capabilities for still shooters who also require video, as well as dual card slots for professionals who require redundancy in their work. And I haven't even mentioned the EOS R6's autofocus, which is insanely fast in nearly every situation, and can shoot down to -6.5 EV on a near moonless night, for unmatched low-light photography. Honestly, the autofocus alone makes the EOS R6 a worthy low-light camera, and if you're an action photographer, or even a more all-around photographer who shoots action, you can't go wrong with the R6. At number 4. Sony A7 III. Like the Canon EOS R6, the Sony A7 III is very much an all-around camera, one that performs well in every area, including low-light shooting. And while I'd hardly call the Sony A7 III a budget model these days, several years after launch and outclassed only by the Nikon Z6 II and the Canon EOS R6, the A7 III's $2,000 price tag seems very reasonable indeed. In fact, the Sony A7 III appeals to hobbyists, semi-professionals, professionals, and videographers alike, and can satisfy pretty much all of them, thanks to its outstanding autofocus and low-light prowess. First, there's ISO, where the A7 III excels. While I do think the Canon EOS R6's and the Nikon Z6 II's ISO performance has crept past the benchmark originally set by the A7 III, it's able to deliver very nice images at ISO 6400, ISO 12800, and even ISO 51200. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say the A7 III is only a half stop worse than the Nikon Z6 II, and only a hair worse than the Canon EOS R6, which means that the gains from grabbing one of these other options are negligible. If you're an event photographer, a night street photographer, or an astrophotographer, this is exactly the type of low-light sensitivity you're looking for. You'll also appreciate the A7 III's in-body image stabilization, helpful for those who like to handhold past sundown. Then there's the autofocus, and while the A7 III doesn't pack Sony's latest algorithms, it still manages to track subjects with ease, making this a very capable low-light wildlife or action camera. Unfortunately, the A7 III can only autofocus down to around -3 EV, but this should be enough for most situations, including images lit by streetlights or car headlights. The A7 III also offers 4K/30p recording, plus a fully articulating screen for composing photos and videos in the field, useful for low-light and standard shooters alike. The biggest drawback to the Sony A7 III is its electronic viewfinder. At just 2.36 m, you'll start to struggle with a muddy feed as the light fades. This isn't a deal breaker, but if you're used to an optical viewfinder, you may find the A7 III's electronic viewfinder inadequate as the light lowers. Ultimately, I do think the Sony A7 III is a powerful low-light contender. And while it does offer the high ISO chops of some of its competitors, its well-rounded specs make it a great do-anything model. At number 5. Nikon Z5. If you're looking for a budget low-light option but you're not willing to compromise on capabilities, then the Nikon Z5 is the way forward. Here's what you get, all for $1,400 US. In-body image stabilization, for capturing sharp images handheld in low light. A full-frame 24-megapixel sensor that produces gorgeous images, with plenty of room for cropping or printing large. As I explained in a previous section, 24MP is in the resolution sweet spot, where you get plenty of detail without huge file sizes or processing requirements. Beautiful high ISO performance, only slightly below that of the Sony A7 III. Noise creeps in around ISO 3200, but images only start to go downhill in the ISO 12800 to ISO 25600 range. This leaves you plenty of room to shoot street photos at night, images of the night sky, indoor portraits, and even some low-light wildlife photos, though see my comments on autofocus below. A very nice electronic viewfinder, packing 3.69m resolution, which will keep you shooting long after dark. For me, at least, 3.69m is a great place to be, and I consistently use a 3.69m EVF in near darkness without too much noise. There's also dual card slots and 4K/30p video, albeit with a 1.7x crop. The Nikon Z5's biggest weakness is its autofocus. While it focuses fast enough during good light, it only works down to -2 EV or -3 EV with low-light autofocus active, so if you're looking to photograph action at night or in dark interiors, I'd recommend you look to one of the other options on this list. Otherwise, the Nikon Z5 is an excellent camera, and one that will rise to the occasion for slower-paced low-light photo shoots, be it architectural photography, landscapes, astrophotography, or indoor portraits. For those who don't want to pay a premium for a full-frame sensor, we've included several APS-C models. While low-light performance isn't on the same level as the full-frame cameras listed above, these options are very respectable, and will do an outstanding job, especially once you factor in the price. At number 6. Nikon Z50. These days, Nikon is producing class-leading sensors, which is why our pick for best low-light APS-C mirrorless camera goes to the Nikon Z50, Nikon's only crop sensor mirrorless body, and one sporting an impressive sub-$900 price tag. Compared to full-frame cameras, crop sensor cameras are at an immediate disadvantage. The smaller sensor leads to smaller pixels, which leads to worse high ISO performance. Yet the Nikon Z50 still manages to hold its own, holding off noise until around ISO 3200, and still capturing usable images to ISO 12800 or so. If you've read my reviews of the best full-frame low-light cameras above, you'll know that this is a very respectable performance, even if it's not on the same level as, say, the Nikon Z6 II. This high ISO performance is better than the other two APS-C cameras on this list, the Fujifilm X-T4 and the Sony A6600. Though it is worth noting that the Nikon Z50 uses a 20.9 megapixel sensor, compared to the 26 MP of the Fujifilm X-T4 and the 24 MP of the Sony A6600. On the other hand, anything north of 18 megapixels is acceptable for most professional use. So unless you're planning to do huge crops or create wall-sized prints, 20 plus megapixels will be just fine. Then there's the low-light autofocus, which is good, but not great. The Z50 generally focuses quickly, and it can shoot down to -4 EV, helpful for those who photograph action indoors or at night. Unfortunately, the Nikon Z50 doesn't offer in-body image stabilization, so handholding at night is tough, but for landscape photographers, architectural photographers, and astrophotographers, that shouldn't be an issue, as you'll need to work with a tripod regardless. As for other Z50 features, you get 11 frames per second shooting, highly useful for anyone who likes to capture action, plus 4K/30p video. My major gripe is the 2.36m viewfinder, which isn't bad, but may frustrate you, especially in low light. All in all, the Nikon Z50 is a very nice camera at a great price. It delivers gorgeous image quality, and as long as you don't expect pro-level autofocus performance, you'll be very satisfied, and maybe even impressed. At number 7. Sony A6600. The Sony A6600 is our final pick for best low-light mirrorless camera, but don't let that deceive you, it's still a powerful performer, and one that'll do a great job in pretty much any situation, low light included. Regarding image quality, the A6600 isn't top of the line, but it's hardly poor. You get clean images through ISO 1600, a slight amount of noise at ISO 3200, and can even push the ISO to 12800 in a pinch. The 24 MP images on the A6600 look nice, and as I've said before, 24 MP sensors are right in the sweet spot, even if I do prefer the 26 MP on the X-T4. Then there's the autofocus, which is truly stellar and puts a number of other cameras on this list to shame. If you're looking for a low-light action camera, then the A6600 is a fantastic choice, especially when you consider its 11 frames per second continuous shooting speed and relatively deep buffer, 46 RAWs or 99 JPEGs. Also important is the in-body image stabilization, which will let you shoot handheld in low light. This is perfect for portrait photographers and even street photographers who may find themselves working at dusk. The Sony A6600's viewfinder is disappointing, especially for the price. And the A6600 handling is a bit cramped for my liking. But if you're after a lower-priced mirrorless camera with in-body image stabilization, fast autofocus, and decent low-light performance, the A6600 is the model to beat.